Hello everyone! So the first limited banner for Atelier Resleriana has finally been announced. As expected, it is the banner with Sophie and Pravda. This was the first banner on the Japanese server, so we knew this was coming. By the time you watch this video, it might already be out. For now, I'm releasing it a few hours before the banner so that you can sort of get ready for these characters, know what to expect, know what they're good for, know what to roll for, know how to gear them up, etc, etc. The banner will be lasting for 10 days, and then we'll get another limited banner after that will probably come with chapter 4 of the game of the main story. So be prepared for that. Now there are a couple changes between this banner and what we got on the Japanese server. For one, the Japanese server we had 13 legend medals when we did 10 wishes. It looks like they're removing that for the global version of the banner, so that's unfortunate. And because of that, we don't actually have any confirmation of what the rates are going to be for these characters. On the Japanese server currently, pickup rate is 1%. So with two characters, it'll be 0.5% each. You have 1% to get a pickup period. When this banner first came, each character was 1%. So hopefully we get that version. But make sure to look at the rates in the gacha screen when it starts, just to be sure of what you're getting into, because it may be a lower pickup rate. Now for the actual characters themselves, they're both 3 stars. Sophie is a bolt defender. She is a very strong unit, and Pravda is a strike breaker. There is also an SSR Memoria included in the banner pickup, which should be also 1%, maybe 0.5, I'm not sure, we'll see later. And I'll go over all 3 of these in a little bit, their pros, cons, how good they are. We will be getting 2 packs of tickets in the shop for 1,500 gems each. These tickets give no legend medals, but they are half-price pulls with your free gems. I recommend them personally, I like them. But whether or not you should buy them is something very personal. Do you care more about your hard pity? Do you care more about sparking a character? Or do you want to gamble your free gems? I think the tickets are better. You end up with more limited characters in the long run, even if you don't get the ones like you specifically want. And these tickets will be a thing on every limited banner in the future. We do generally get enough free currency to buy these tickets every single banner, so if you just want to, use tickets, that is a valid strategy. Alright, so what are these characters good for? What do they do? We're gonna get into Sophie first, and everyone says, Sophie's really good, she's S tier. Is that actually true? And yes, it's true. She is a generically good character that can fit into basically every team, and she is still used, still top tier on the Japanese server today, 4 months after release. So why is she good? Well, first of all, I'll talk about what the defender role kind of is for in this game, and why being a defender isn't exactly what makes her good, but it is totally fine for her, and why she is actually one of the better defenders. So defenders in this game all have a passive skill, not all of them, but most of them have a passive skill, where enemies are more likely to target them. There are a few enemies that can ignore this, but effectively defenders have a permanent taunt on them, so single target abilities will go to the defender first before going to your squishier party members, like your attackers, your supporters, your breakers. This can be very strong if your defender is tanky enough to live. One thing that you'll kind of see early game in Resleriana before you're geared, before you have stats, is that defenders just get focused down and die very quickly. Once they have gear, that happens less often, although it will still happen depending on the content, but once you're able to actually keep them alive, once they're tanky, the role becomes a lot more valuable, in my opinion. And so why is Sophie good as a defender? Well, first of all, she has solid stats. She has high HP, a good amount of high physical defense and magic defense, and they're balanced. Many defenders specialize in one, either magic or physical. Balanced defense stats are generally better because damage types very often get mixed in this game. She also has a very good amount of speed. 256 is quite fast. And the reason you want speed isn't so much because she's a defender, but it's actually because of her skills. Her skill 2 is one of the strongest skills in the game, and it is a single target attack skill. After attacking, inflict the debuff all resistance minus 30% for 2 turns on the target, until that target is attacked twice. So it has 2 stacks, each one gets consumed every time the target is attacked, so it lasts for 2 attacks. This debuff is absurdly strong, and there is nothing else in the game that can replace this. If you use it on an enemy with 0% resistance, which is pretty normal, that means all of your attacks after the next 2 attacks do 30% more damage and 30% more stun damage. If you use it on an enemy with 25% resistance, which is normal for a resistant enemy, that number goes up to 40% more damage. And not only that, it's a general resistance debuff. It's all resistances. Usually your utility characters will only target 1 or 2 resistances to debuff. So like Eska does slash and wind, Claudia, who comes later, does ice. Sophie doing all is kind of unheard of in this game, and that's what makes her so generically useful. Not only that, but this skill can apply a weakness state to the target. So weakness, as you'll notice when you're playing the game, is when a target is weak to an element. Weakness, a target is weak when they have minus 25% resistance or lower in that element. So if they have 0% resistance and you use the skill, they become weak. And there's a few items and memoria and skills and other things in this game where an enemy having the weakness state to your damage type actually matters. So the skill can also trigger that state on a lot of enemies. It's just very good. And the speed matters here because it's easy for her to outspeed your breakers. The resistance debuff is very good for increasing your break damage. Or if you need to increase your actual damage for your attackers, you just make sure to not put any speed gear on her and have her go after your breakers, and then you can increase your normal damage as well. So she's very versatile in that sense, on top of being able to, tank damage for your squishier characters. Her skill 1 is also nothing to scoff at. It is a very strong recovery skill where when she attacks, she recovers up to 30% of her HP based on how low her HP is. So if she is at 25% of her HP, she will recover 30%. If she's higher, she will recover less, but it gets stronger as her HP goes lower. So, and it has a short wait time because it's her skill 1. So this skill is very good. And then we have her burst. You're not going to be wanting to use her burst too often. It is the same as her skill 2 with a higher value of the resistance shred. It's minus 50% instead of minus 30%. It is a strong burst when you actually use it, if it just lines up like that. In general, you won't be focusing on trying to use it though, as you want to use your bursts on attackers and breakers more often than not. But it's still very nice. So that is Sophie in general. She is absolutely deserving of S tier. Once you get her, you will just use her all the time. I will say, if you have been waiting to reroll for her for a new account, you may be a little disappointed with her in the main story. I'm not completely sure, as I have never done the main story with her, but she is a defender, which means she will get focused down a lot in the main story when you're underleveled and fairly squishy. So she is definitely more of an endgame unit when you're trying to optimize damage against endgame battles. So just keep that in mind if you start a new account with her, that she may be a little underwhelming early on. And the last part of her gifts, these two are for usable items, they're not that useful. In the global version, this would be, what, Magic Curse, I believe. Magic Curse is okay for debuff items, but usually you want to use buff items, so these ones don't matter too much. And then she has increased physical resistance for defenders, for equipment. This trait is not very good, so her synthesis use is pretty limited. You generally don't want to use her in synthesis. Alright, so that's all for Sophie. Let's go to Pravda. Pravda is a... if it'll load. There we go. Pravda is a strike breaker, and she is an area breaker with fairly decent speed. So the current area breakers in the game are Mari and Shally, and Pravda is faster than both of them, so her speed is very good. However, the power on her skill 2, her area break skill, is a bit low. The break power is a bit low at 57, whereas Shally is like 70. And it's because of this buff buff she has here. After attacking a weak target, she gives a buff for break damage plus 20% to your entire party. This buff is not super useful. Generally, you want to be breaking either with this character, but it does have synergy with other AoE breakers like Shally and Mari, and of course Sophie herself, because Sophie can use her skill 2 to make a target weak, right? So if you use Sophie's skill 2 and make a target weak, then you use this skill, the target will be weak, so it'll take more break damage, and Pravda will be able to apply this buff to all of your allies. And so then Mari or Shally or any single target breaker you have will be able to do more break damage on the turn after that, which is a very potent combo for breaking an entire field of enemies. Her skill 1 doesn't have anything special. Its wait time is 75 though, so it is fairly fast. This is not as big of a boon as you might expect. It can kind of muck things up when trying to manipulate your timeline. I would say her skill 1 is not great, but I have actually never used her personally. I've never pulled her. I don't have her. So I don't actually know how much of an effect this has. And then we have her break skill. It is a single target break skill with OK break with break damage plus 50% when attacking weakness, and she recovers if it breaks the target. This is okay. Very often a burst break will already be breaking a weak target, so this plus 50% is kind of excessive. You would rather see this just as a general multiplier, but if it does get you over the threshold to break an enemy, it's still like good. It's a very solid breaker burst skill, so don't discount this when you need it, but you will be mostly using her for her skill 2, which is an area break skill. If you have used Shally or Mari so far, you know how strong that is. Her passives are nothing special, just generic ailment resistance, blind resistance, and a small increase to the physical attack of all allies. This is a pretty standard passive for most characters. And yeah, as far as her stats go, the main thing is her speed. She is decently fast. Not the fastest here, but she's alright. And then her gifts. The use item gifts, as expected, are not very good. Usually for usable items, you're just looking for critical finish, not really anything else. And then her other one for equipment is increased impact damage. This is also not that great because you want skill power on your gear, so she's not a great synthesis character either. But I would put Pravda probably in a solid B+, A- tier. If you miss her, it's not a big deal. She's not really, like, she is replaceable. There are other AoE breakers. She does the role okay, but she does not, like, excel in it to such an extent that, you know, you absolutely need her. But if you don't have other AoE breakers like Mari, she is still very good. So yeah, solid character, but not must-have is basically the rating here. But if you get her, you're not unhappy. Also, her shorts are super cute. All right, so how do we go about gearing these characters? So one thing about Pravda and Sophie is that a lot of their gear actually isn't in the game at the point they're released. A significant amount of it will be released with the next update with Chapter 4. So first I'll go through the equipment that you might be able to make for them right now, and then I'll go over the equipment that is coming for them in the future. So out of the recipes we have right now, a good accessory for Sophie is the hot blooded bandana. This item is fairly cheap to make, not super cheap, but somewhat cheap, and while equipped to a defender, it just generically reduces the damage they receive. It has good stats, HP, speed. It's just a solid defender accessory all around. And then as far as armor and weapons go, for weapon, we have the training path. This is one of the best weapons for Sophie basically forever. It requires you to synthesize 500 times, so you probably won't even have it by the time the next update comes out, but you definitely want to keep this one in mind for Sophie. It boosts the potency of negative effects inflicted by 8%. This scales her resistance debuff. With this, it goes up to 32%, which isn't much, but it is something. And then we also have the Radiant Plate, which is the same thing on body armor. And those are your good Sophie equipment that are in the game right now. For Pravda, we don't have any good weapons or accessories for breakers yet. But there are a couple options for armor. Late game, there is the Charade Lumont, which boosts stun damage for area attacks. You will not have this for a little... I mean, you can get it, honestly, pretty early if you can clear 3-2 very hard with SS, which is definitely doable right now. However, it is very expensive. It takes a lot of materials. I don't recommend focusing on making this in general until you are just swimming in materials. It is a good item, but it is so expensive and there are better things to spend your stamina on. And the other recipe, I believe, was it the hard coat? Where is it? Here it is. This is the budget version. It boosts physical stun damage by 6%. This is going to be your best armor for Pravda for a long time, and thankfully it's actually pretty cheap. You will just need to farm a bunch of these honeypot ants from Risk 2 dungeons, so this is definitely a good armor for Pravda. And as far as the ones that aren't in the game yet, let's just go to those real quick. These will all be in with the next update. The first one is the Steel Bow. This is break damage plus 8% for breakers. It is a very good break weapon. It is a little expensive. You may end up focusing on other things than this, but it is a solid breaker weapon, so this is good for Pravda. And the other item that's good for Pravda is the Layered Velvet for strike characters. And what this armor does is after attacking, it inflicts a debuff to the target where they take 5% more damage if you're a strike character. This is very good for Pravda. It's very synergistic because it will apply this debuff to every target because she hits all enemies. Very solid armor for her. However, break damage may be more impactful, so you sort of have to choose between the two. And then we have the Thunderclap armor for Sophie. After attacking, it's the same as the Layered Velvet, inflicts a debuff with damage taken plus 5%. It just makes her do her job as a debuffer even better. So very solid armor for Sophie. And the last thing is the Flourish Heart. This will just improve Sophie's recovery. Recover 3 to 4% of your maximum HP after using a skill if you are a defender. So very, very, very good weapon for Sophie. However, it's not better than the training path, which improves her debuff efficacy. And then for these characters, as far as traits go, Defenders are kind of hard to itemize with traits. I would probably just mostly go skill power and break damage on Sophie for a while. However, there is also the area defense trait, which reduces damage from area attacks by 25%. This is a very good trait in general. And then just in general, like any sort of damage reduction trait is okay on her, but damage reduction traits in this game are pretty weak in general outside of the area defense one. So I would mostly itemize Sophie for extra damage and break. Unless you absolutely need to. As far as Pravda goes, you do want increased stun damage on her. So increased physical stun damage and just generic increased stun damage are both very good on her. It's break on the site because the site's for this is a Japanese database. It's not updated for global yet, but break is stun. So yeah, physical stun damage, very good for Pravda. Stun damage, mostly what you're getting on her. All right, so for the last thing, let's go over the Memoria. Let me just find it in here real quick. It is this one. So this Memoria is Sophie focused. It has defensive stats, high magic defense, high physical defense, high HP, very weak offensive stats. And it has an okay amount of speed, but not a ton of speed. And its effect is, after receiving an attack, give all allies the buff skill damage plus 1 to 8% for 1 turn if your attribute is lightning. So this is very good for Sophie because she's the defender. She will be receiving the attacks. However, unless you have multiple copies, it's not the effect isn't doing anything, right? Like when she attacks, she gives 1% skill damage to everyone. That's like whatever. If you have it at max rank, it's 8%. It becomes pretty decent. However, it's still kind of mediocre. You don't really need to pull for this Memoria. It's not like a meta Memoria later on or anything. It's good if you get it, but due to the defensive stat line, due to it not being that strong, like it is good at max rank, but it is not OP. There are better Memoria that you want to use your very limited unlock currency on. This one is happy if you get it, don't pull specifically for it, more or less. And that is everything for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed the Sophie OST in the background. The songs I've been playing are the original soundtrack for the game that Sophie and Pravda are from. If you like that music, check the game out. If you haven't played other Atelier games before, Atelier Sophie is a fantastic game, and it's a great game to get started with the other main games in the series other than Resleriana. So, you know, if you're enjoying Resleri, Sophie might be a pretty cool game. The other Atelier games are pretty different, but they still have Gathering, they still have Battles and Synthesis, and of course they have tons of cute girls. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the video, hope it was helpful, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.